I'm going to go ahead and introduce the rest of the panel, starting with CJ. CJ Olson. CJ's been with Saddle Creek since 2005. He handles project management, production management, radio promotion, as well as some marketing and A&R for the label. CJ was born in Omaha and gained a love of music from his parents at a young age. He was lucky enough to cultivate that love further with countless hours spent at the Antiquarium record store with the rest of us, I think. I got a lot of time at the Antiquarium with Dave Fink. Going to shows, playing in bands, and generally being surrounded by the staggering number of insanely creative people that call Omaha home. So thank you, CJ, for being a part of this. Next to CJ is Mike Mogis. Mike, in my opinion, is the secret sauce behind the Saddle Creek Records sound. Owner-operator of ARC Studios, Mike's recorded all the Saddle Creek stable's most successful artists, including The Faint, Cursive, Azure Ray, Bright Eyes, in which he's also a member alongside Connor Oberst, and some non-Creek acts like First Aid Kit, Pete Yorn, one of my favorites, one of the saddest guys in the world. Maybe he's not that sad, but his music's sad to me. Jason Mraz and Monsters of Folk, another band in which he's also a member. A couple of his most recent projects include the sophomore release by Icky Blossoms, which I think comes out this week. Is that right? Tomorrow. So go out and get it. And the new one by Desaparecidos, which comes out, I think, June 23rd on Epitaph Records. His work also includes soundtracks. Mike scored, alongside the super talented Nate Wolcott, the soundtrack for the 2014 tearjerker, The Fault in Our Stars. How many people saw that film? Well, great soundtrack. Do you think so? I don't know.
I saw a couple out there.
So Mike Mogis, everybody. All right. Next to Mike is Orenda Fink. I knew her as a member of Azure Ray, along with Maria Taylor. Originally from Birmingham, Alabama, Orenda and Maria were drawn to Omaha sometime around, 2002? I'm thinking 2003, something like that. The duo has released 4 full lengths and a handful of EPs, the most recent being the EP As Above, So Below in 2012. Azure Ray music has been heard on movies and TV, including the soundtracks to The Devil Wears Prada, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Parenthood, The Good Wife, the list goes on and on. But in addition to Azure Ray, Orenda's been in Art Manila, which I wish was still around. Great, great band. O+S with Scapalist, a.k.a. Cedric Lemoyne of Remy Zero. Great, great record. And is a successful solo artist with 3 full lengths on Saddle Creek, including 2014's Blue Dream. Her music has taken her all over the country and in Europe, right? On tours. And Asia. She's big in Japan. So let's welcome Orenda. And last but not least, to my right, Matt Whipkey. He's an acclaimed singer-songwriter and guitarist for Omaha, from Omaha, having earned the Omaha Arts and Entertainment Award for Artist and Album of the Year in 2013. Whipkey's live band features some of the city's finest musicians. In a city internationally renowned for top-tier songwriting, Whipkey balances musical execution with artistic instinct. He's one of the best live performers the city has. If you haven't had a chance to see him, you should, because he puts everything into it whenever he's on stage. Matt Whipkey. So let's start off, basically with some background from everyone. I want to take a chance at this. Basically, give everybody some idea on where you got to, how you got to where you are now, and in terms of your career, how it started and how you got where you are. Let's start with CJ.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I just grew up listening to and loving music, and a lot of that is because of my parents and the things that they were into. I grew up, hearing Velvet Underground and Lou Reed and all sorts of things that have carried on into my adult life that I've loved. And I went to school and got a history degree, so followed like a really typical path to the music industry that way. But along the way, I just made friends who were in bands because we had common interests and common loves of music and culture and art. And the Omaha art community is very strong, so it's easy to step into that and just feel really welcomed and a part of it. But while I was in school, I started working part-time at Saddle Creek, just sort of helping out with odd jobs. And then I finished school and got that history degree, and instead of doing anything with it, started working at the label full-time and have picked up different duties over the years and kind of landed where I'm at, kind of sort of by happenstance, but yeah, that's how I got here.
So what's your primary responsibilities to the label?
I do radio promotion and project management. Those are the two big things. But then I do A&R work along with a few other people there and other odds and ends.
All right, so A&R, once and for all, define what that means for the folks.
It means
What does it stand for? Artist relation? What is it?
artists and repertoire. It means you, huh?
Mike has learned something today.
Yep. Yeah. You learn stuff every day.
I try, Mike. It means you listen to a lot of bands online and a lot of bands that you don't like, and then every once in a while you find one that really connects to you and you try to get a hold of them, or you hear about a band from a friend that you really like, and it, you know.
You help sign artists.
Yeah, you
bring artists into your
you
label.
bring artists to the label that you think are a good fit, and you reach out to them and try to, you know, get them on board with your label and have them put the record out on your label, essentially.
Cool. Mike, tell us how you got where you got.
Gosh, I don't even know. Well, as far as starting, I guess my main job now is kind of in the production world and recording. And some of my earliest memories of as a child is with my brother AJ, like recording just sounds on a cassette deck and having a little mixer and bouncing things back and forth. I was just enamored by the hearing stuff back that just happened, and then slowing it down, and then adding something to. I don't know. It was just kind of fun to create weird little. I wish I could find it. It'd be so embarrassing. I should. Anyways, but I always liked sound, and I didn't play an instrument. I started playing guitar when I was like 10, I guess. I got my first electric when I was 11, so I must have started playing before then. So. I don't know, my dad played guitar, so he just had one sitting around, and I started playing it. And I don't know, I can't say that their musical taste rubbed off on me very much, but I just always liked sounds. And anyways, throughout high school, I grew up in a small town. It didn't really seem like a thing that was even feasible to do, like be a musician or a producer or anything involved in the arts, honestly. But I just felt like that's all I really know how to do is, that's what I felt passionate about doing. So similar to CJ, I went to college. I didn't know anybody there. And I met people in the dorms that I lived in. And there are people that, one of which I started a record label with, which is Rob Nansel, the owner of Saddle Creek. He lived in a room with Ted Stevens, who I started my first band with, which was Lullaby for the Working Class. And, never mind. So I went to college. I got a business degree, actually. But
yeah, your first studio was in Lincoln, right? It was
in Lincoln. Sorry, it's in UNL, L as in Lincoln, and that little group of people, and Connor, who I'm in a band with now and still working with to this day, that he would come up and stay with Rob and Ted in their dorm room, and I met him during that time, and I was like, this little kid, Like he plays acoustic guitar, and it was funny, you know. Anyways, but you could see he was very talented, and so it was kind of cool to see these guys and like some really talented young people. It kind of brought me back a little bit. It's like I remember feeling excited about, you know, when you make your first songs and you listen to it back, and it's like, oh, it's a cool feeling. I'm getting little goosebumps thinking about it. But like, you know, because it's very emotive to me. It's still making songs and music, and so I guess it's what's made me persevere through this, because it takes a lot of patience and dedication to whatever craft you're honing in the arts. But I'm trailing off here. So I don't know.
So
But through those relationships we developed, we just had our own little scene kind of starting to develop there, just kind of out of nothing, just all these things kind of coming together, and it can happen, honestly, it could happen anywhere, but like,
You know, at some point, though, you've made a choice between being a full-time musician, right, or a full-time, or mostly full-time producer, right?
Right.
How do you make that choice?
well, I don't. Like well, you're talking about between being a musician and, or sorry, being a full-time musician or a full-time producer?
Yes.
Okay. I kind of just go with whatever's happening. Like, you know, if Connor wanted to make another Bright Eyes record, I would do that and then go for 2 years of full-time musician, which I kind of like doing that. It balances out, like, my brain a little bit from like keeping my guitar skills up and just creative chops up, and then also having, you know, the flip side of that is the producer side, which is more about helping artists develop a sound, or help, you know, refine songs, and I don't know, bring all the elements together that provide a good representation of a song. It helps guide that and put it together. And I feel like I operate best when I can sort of go between both of them, because they keep me fresh, I suppose. Like once I go on tour for a while, it's like hitting the studios, it's new again, you know? So I've been doing more production though recently, because Connor's doing other things. So that's what I was like, I don't really it hasn't been a decision that I totally make alone, but so.
All right.
Yeah.
Orenda, tell me how it got started, and kind of where you are now and how you got there.
Well, I started out writing songs like a lot of you in here in high school with Maria Taylor, who was my best friend at the time. Well, still is. But we met each other in high school. We both went to fine arts high school, and for different disciplines outside of music, so it was kind of an interesting turn of events that we met each other and started playing music together, and then both went into music instead of...
What other disciplines?
I was in theater, and she was a dance major.
I see.
So to the delight of our parents, after spending all that money, we just didn't go into either of those fields, but we did find what we really loved, which was music and creating music with each other. And we were absolutely obsessed with writing songs together and singing together, and really just did it every, you know, spare second of our time, and kind of forced ourselves onto parties and events, and eventually we met Remy Zero, which was a band in the 90s in Birmingham that was signed to a major label, and that was a big deal back then. And they kind of took us under their wing and started mentoring us, you know, as to really what it meant to be a professional musician. And that was the first time, I think, that we saw this thing that we were loving doing, that it could potentially be also a career path for us. So, you know, with kind of their guidance, we started a real band, and, you know, got a drummer and a bass player, and within a year, we were also signed to a major label, which was a very strange turn of events that no one expected.
And it wasn't Sally, it was Warren? Was it Warren Records?
It was Geffen.
Geffen, okay.
Geffen Records, yeah.
A little bit bigger than I thought.
This is Little Red Rocket. I was
Okay,
20
right,
years
right.
old when we got signed to Geffen. And we got dropped pretty soon after that. Geffen was bought out by Universal, and they kind of cleaned house and dropped all the bands that didn't, have it going on already. So our major label experience was very brief, but we did get a little chunk of money for getting dropped, and we took that money and made a record with it. And that's kind of how we started putting records out on independent labels. We never went back to majors after that because we didn't really enjoy the major label experience very much. But so after Little Red Rocket kind of ran its course, we started Azure Ray together, which was back to the two of us and a more somber, kind of mature type of songwriting. And then it was with that band, I think, that we definitely saw our most successful period, as artists working together. And a lot of that time was spent on Saddle Creek Records, and so worked with CJ, worked with Mike, and it was a really great time. And then I think in 2007, Azure Ray took an indefinite hiatus, and Marie and I both started doing different bands and solo projects, and so I've kind of kept myself busy since then, just basically kind of going with my inspiration, and I like to collaborate with people, so a lot of them are my very close friends. O+S is with Cedric Lemoyne of Remy Zero, who got us started in the 90s, so it's a very tight-knit kind of family group, throughout the country of people that I work with. And that's basically it. So I just kind of do what feels right to me at the time, and sometimes it turns into a more long-term project. Sometimes it'll be a one-off, but yeah, I don't know. That's about it. Yeah.
Awesome. Matt, why don't you tell us? I've been watching you perform for how long has it been now?
I think I met you when I was probably 18 or 19 years old.
So what got you started? And
Well, I growing up, I was always very drawn to music. I suppose I always, as a little kid, banging on drum or a guitar, but nothing really made me feel like I could do it. Like all those bands, I remember as a kid, like NXS and Duran Duran and Van Halen and stuff, but none of them made me feel like I could play the guitar because it looked kind of hard. But when it was actually Nirvana, when they kind of came out, I felt like I actually could do that. I could play the guitar, so I got one for Christmas, and then I took some lessons, and I didn't really have much interest in playing other people's songs. I teach guitar for my day job, and I it's funny now as an adult I do teach a lot of other people's songs, but when I was growing up I didn't have much interest in that, and I was more interested in writing my own songs. So I think probably about 14 or so years old I started doing that. And it's funny because one of the reasons I was interested in doing that was my sister, who's 5 years older than me, kind of ran in circles with Tim Kasher and Ted Stevens, and I know her best friend, she dated Ted in high school. So I'd hear these tapes when I was in 7th grade of Conor Oberst when he was just very, very young, because he's just a year older than me. And then him and then Simon Joyner actually kind of made me feel like I could write songs. And that's just because they were pretty raw sounding, a few chords, and it was more important. But I think I always felt like the words were more important at that point, and I've always been drawn to literature and writing. So started writing songs, and then in high school I was involved in political kind of stuff, kind of leftist, young radical politics. We would put on shows, just local shows, and luckily got to have some of those guys play, the Faint and Connor and Tim, and met all the people in that community, and hanging out at the Antiquarium. And it sort of seems like what you did in the 90s in Omaha, if you were a teenager with any kind of musical leanings. It was much way cooler scene than hanging out at the Ranch Bowl. Well, we did that too, but and then I was performed by myself, and I didn't really get my first band until I was 19 or 20, because I'd meet people and play, but nothing ever really clicked. It was always just easier to perform songs on my own. and I was happy that I did that because growing up, you meet people and they're almost, the idea of getting up by yourself and performing is kind of terrifying. But if you started when you were like 15, 16, it's not so bad. So it was cool to see so many young people like do that because you're so fearless when you're young. I don't think if I started doing this when I was 25, I don't think I could have. I don't think it would have happened, you know. So, but at 16, I remember the first time I ever played live. My mom told me not to because I wasn't very good. And in a loving way, in a way like she was scared for my future embarrassment. I don't know if I'd probably just continually break her heart with it, but yeah, so started a band, you know, made some records. I guess the important thing is I've always have stuck with it. I always keep writing, keep improving as a musician. Hopefully, you know, I don't know if it's tenacity or just somewhat. You have to be. It's somewhat stupidity, but tenacity, stupidity. It's a combination of both. Ambition. But you know, I went to school. I got a degree in journalism, and just really have immersed myself in music. And you know, then later on in life, started playing, exploring playing lead guitar with some people like Brad Hoshaw. It's kind of my other main band, and then my own thing. So just really to keep busy. I'm always every week. Music's happening in one way or another, and that's luckily I'm able to do it, you know, for a living. It's not, that sounds more impressive than it is. It's really not much of a living, but it's an existence, I suppose. But the important thing is to stick with it, and you know, it'll break your heart, but let it. You know, it's good to have your heart broken a few times in life, right? So. It's kind of my short story.
That's a touching sentiment, Matt.
Yeah.
So this is songwriters. So let me ask you a songwriting question, and CJ jump into as a song. I don't know if you've probably never written a song, CJ. Have you? You've written a few songs. That's right. You're in the Suquettes.
Susettes. Yeah.
So
I haven't written any.
So
of
here's
those
a question I have, which is, it's kind of a strange question, but it's something I thought about today. What's the difference, or where do you draw the line between, you know, like a personal songwriting, writing songs for yourself, and writing something that might appeal to a larger audience? Or is there a line? Or maybe is the idea that not putting that line out there or trying to create music that's popular is maybe the secret?
Well, I don't think, is that just...
That's for everybody, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't write that many songs, but I help people make them in the studio. Is the question, as a songwriter, when you're creating a song, does the notion of like trying to create a song that might be popular, is that what would influence your decisions in the process?
Yeah.
I don't think it does. I mean, I feel like for most people that I know that I've worked with, most of it just comes from a very internal place that everybody works differently, though. Gosh. And I'm speaking of this just from more of observationally than like you guys are the songwriters mostly. But I feel that most of the folks that I've worked with, that doesn't really enter their mind. It's most of the stuff that I gravitate towards, similar to what Matt was saying, is that lyrics are very important to me, and how the song speaks to me, and I feel like the people that I work with, when they're writing the songs, that's how they're making judgments as well. It's kind of about the story or the imagery or the lyric, and then I guess there is a point where you do start to structure this, and some things do enter your mind, but well, I don't know. I guess not mine. It's you just start putting it together in the most the way that you want to hear it back, and
So there's no preconceived notion of like, I'm going to write a hit.
no. Not in my world. In the sense of, well, okay.
But in Beyonce's world.
Yeah, and which I go to every now and then. No.
Nickelback's world.
Well, most of those people buy songs
That's true.
from songwriters. And those people write, like Sia, there's really good ones too. They'll be, I'm gonna write a hit. Or there's top line writers, which just write the hook, the chorus, like the refrain with the melody, and they sell those to people. You know, one person might do 10 a day. It's
Yeah,
weird.
so some people do that.
Yeah, not the people that I've worked with
Yeah.
that much. They're more in the organic world, but there's a, sorry.
Oh, I just think of the songs as like mini art pieces. So, you know, there's, once you know what you're trying to convey in that song and you have the lyrics where you want them, you know, the production and the craft, that's kind of the place where you would, try to make it a hit or whatever. It just needs to serve your idea the best way. And, I mean, I've found that if the songs that people are gravitate towards most are the ones that you don't try too hard to make a hit. They're the ones that are just really come from your heart and your vision. So that's always, you can't go wrong with that. Because if people don't like it, it doesn't matter. Because you accomplished something special. And if they do like it, then that's great. So that's kind of my idea about it.
Yeah, I think that's really true with the ones that you wouldn't, at least in my experience, like things I've spent the most time on are sometimes the ones that no one really seems to care about, and that's always a drag. But sometimes the songs that I learned to trust that if it happens quick, that's awesome. That's a good thing. It's usually something that might be catchy, and it's usually like A, D, and E are the chords, and people seem to like those, and that's okay. You know, but about the personal thing, I know on this last album that I made, I actually used like people's real names and things, so it was, but it's just because I wanted it to be very open and honest and not kind of almost like anti-universal, because I wanted to be real direct in the language, and I was nervous that it would translate because people, you know, wouldn't know that person because that's a person in my life, but I found that it's actually kind of worked the opposite, where people seem to be, because the character, not characters, they're real people. They're, I mean, like other people in other people's lives. So it translated well. But I think you can approach something to make, like Mike was saying, to make a hit. I mean, it's a business in Nashville. It's what you go there to do, you know, to write. Yeah. I mean, at the music store, I've worked at Dietz Music forever, and I always get a kick out of when we get the sheet music in, and like for any like top 40 song, it takes like 15 people to write that song, you know. And then you look at Desolation Row by Bob Dylan, it's like words of music, Bob Dylan, you know. But for Get This Party Started, it's 20 people, you know. Like, what'd they all do? You know, it's really funny. I want to know what they did, because it's probably a decent career. It's, you know, I've written songs for some commercials where it's like the job was they hire you to write the song to sell that weight loss drug, and that was the job, you know, and it was fun. You know?
Orenda, I was going to ask you in terms of songwriting, and Matt, you can chime in on this as well, and anyone else. What's the difference between writing for Azure Ray and writing with a partner, and writing with a band, and writing just a solo work? Is there a different way of songwriting for those instances?
There are elements that are the same, but I guess I could talk about the differences, which are, you know, with Azure Ray, because it's always been kind of a special collaboration with Maria, because we did start out so young and we were so close throughout the process that I think we kind of had this like symbiotic writing. We wrote the songs individually, but they needed to reflect the sentiment of both of us, because we're both singing these songs together very intimately. So there was a little bit of a conscious effort not to get too far, you know, in one kind of tangential area. So that was the way it was with Azure Ray. With, say, like Art in Manila, writing for a band, the difference to me just there is that, you know, you have a little bit more freedom to express different emotions and intensities, because you actually have a group of people, you know, playing live loud music with you. So that's just kind of, it's almost like more like the back in the days of writing for a rock band, you know. And then you kind of write in mind with the people that you're playing with, which is fun too. And then for solo, you know, I try to kind of reserve my solo work for things that would not work for either of those things. Things that are maybe so personal or so specific of a theme or a subject to me in my life that it makes sense to just kind of do it myself. So it is a good outlet for that kind of writing.
Matt, is that the same for you? You've written in bands, you've written solo stuff.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's definitely always, the song just kind of happens as it happens, and then as it's developing, I kind of, I'll be in mind like, oh, okay, this has a more of a rock feel that would work well with, you know, this band. Like over the years, I've been in a few different bands, so they each kind of had their own feel to them. So as they'd go along, I'd be like, okay, this sounds like, one of my bands was called Anonymous American, and it was a real like kind of replacement-y kind of rock band. Like they're all kind of like that, really, but that one maybe more so. So some songs were like, okay, that would be good with those guys. And then sometimes if it's real quiet and an intimate song, I kind of like keeping those just for myself. And when I record them, I like to do all the parts myself. But yeah, and I guess I never really written songs with anybody else. I think that's a pretty special connection to have with somebody. And I've definitely been in bands with other people that write songs, and I try to like collaborate in that sense to not get in the way of what they're doing. But yeah, every song sort of has its direction, I suppose. Some are better suited for a solo sort of acoustic setting, and some could be more bombastic.
CJ, I've run into you at South by Southwest. I've seen you at shows. And I know you and Rob Nansel go to Austin every year. You go to CMJ every year. And I'm sure with these folks, these potential stars in the audience probably want to know is, as an A&R person, what do you look for in a prospective band or artist? What makes them stand out? For example, we talked earlier, I know you were involved in signing Saddle Creek's latest band, Hop Along. Tell us what kind of, how do you stand out, how do people stand out in those situations?
Well, with Hop Along, Rob was the first person at the label that stumbled upon them. I think just kind of looking around online, found them somehow.
Literally clicking around online, he found their music. Is that?
I mean, they had put a record out that and sort of built a little bit of a following on their own. You know, they had established themselves as their own thing. It wasn't a total shot in the dark. They're from Philadelphia. They've, you know, toured the country a few times. They've put the foundation in place already to be a successful band, and you know, put themselves on our radar. And he passed that along to Jeff DeFoya, who is another person that works at the label with me, and myself, and both of us connected to it as well. Just lyrically, very strong. I think historically, a lot of Saddle Creek's artists' strongest suit is their lyrics. I think. I mean, her voice is very. I mean, they're just a good band all around. She has a unique voice. But I mean, if you go from, you know, Bright Eyes, Orenda, Azure Ray, Tim Kasher, a lot of our bands that have been the most successful bands, a thing that people really gravitate toward is the lyrical content. I mean, the musicianship, the composition, all of that is strong in all of those bands. But in my mind, Hop Along, she spent a lot of time really crafting interesting lyrics that were very personal but very universal. And then was able to take that framework of, a basic pop song with really strong lyrics, and then taking the full band and fleshing it out, making compositions with 3 other people who are her bandmates, and making them fully realized, and just had everything come together lyrically, compositionally, melodically, and yeah.
And so you can feel it right away, right? I mean, when you hear something that resonates with you.
Yeah, and another thing that's important for us is just something that makes sense in the context of what our label is and the type of music that we have put out historically, and the type of music that people who care about Saddle Creek come to expect from us.
Right
And
on.
I think with that specific example, it fit really well in kind of the arc of what we've done over the last 20 or 25 years.
Great. So you find the band, and then the band goes into the studio. And so my question here for Mike is, and a couple folks who are going to be spending some studio time with you, is what do you tell musicians who are entering the studio especially for the first time, how to prepare for that experience? What should they be ready to have? Should they already have their songs written? Should they be ready to go? I mean,
That would depend on how much time you have in the studio, which would depend on how much money you have. And yeah, I mean, generally speaking, most of the artists that I work with, I mean, we always do a little pre-production work, going over the songs. Most of the time these days, it's back and forth on the internet. But my job is helping, picking out what songs to record. An artist will have 20 demos, and then you take it all in, and you find which ones you think are strong for various reasons, and then you start refining those, like 14 songs or 14 songs to make an album is kind of average to start with, and then I don't know. We tend to work out structures and all the writing bits ahead of time. That always changes in the studio. I mean, if you end up making the record you thought you were going to make, it probably did something wrong. I mean, like the turns that you kind of, you're just sort of discovering these songs as you're making them, and you're getting to know. A lot of times, the first time you ever hear them back, I mean, yeah. So I guess there's various levels of preparation. Sorry, but for first-time artists, sometimes that is a bit much, because that's more along the lines of more established, artists. So I guess, for folks out there, I mean, practicing is
I mean,
being good.
I would assume they'd have some songs ready to go, at least
Yeah.
written.
Yeah, I mean,
Relatively proficient at their instrument.
yeah, that would be
They know how to
helpful.
tune
Yeah.
their guitars.
Well, just and the relation. Some artists I have different relationships with, like the bands that I play in with Connor, or the other one like Monsters of Folk. We wrote a lot of our stuff in the studio. Connor will have lyrics, but he'll be finishing them as we're doing the vocals, and because he won't. He likes to hear it back sometimes, and just okay, that doesn't sound, then he'll change a line. And so there's various degrees of where you need to be before you go in to make a recording. But when you're first starting out, it's kind of, I mean, that's why I started recording myself. I just got nervous, I don't know. And I went to the studio for the first time, I think. It was at Studio Q in Lincoln, and I drove up there from North Platte, and I remember thinking I could do that. I had a little 8-track reel-to-reel machine. I thought our recording sounded about the same. We just spent $5,000 for a week. Studio time was actually kind of more expensive back then. Anyways, and I don't know. I don't think I was prepared, I guess. So, but now I've learned. And
Now-
I guess
now
I'm
you're-
not really sharing that information, but you know, each case is a little bit different. And the winners of this competition both were kind of piano-based. Well, they are piano-based songs, and those lend themselves. They're more like the tempo is kind of flowing, and they lend itself towards less of a band approach, you know. And most of the groups that I work with, even the solo artists, want like additional, musicians and stuff. And thinking about, in this situation, these songs, I don't know, I guess I have to think about it a little bit more, but Drew won the competition, and that one I think could stand on its own, just sort of like a nice quality recording of him performing that song. It feels like adding too much stuff would be a little disingenuous to it. It would feel like you're trying too hard.
All right.
So never mind.
We're coming up to about 7:16, so before we get questions from the audience, because I know we have a few, I want just real quick, one piece of advice from each one of you and a sentence for this audience, starting with CJ.
I guess what I learned tonight is get a degree that you're never going to use. And no, I don't, just if you're writing songs, write songs that are true to your life and true to yourself, and something that's genuine, because I think that's kind of come up a few times, and like with the things that have done the best for us as a label, sales-wise, or just things that seem to have connected with people the most, were songs and albums that came from a personal, genuine place, and not something that was just very surface level pop music, something that people can connect to on a very deep personal level.
Yeah, on that same kind of note, I don't know, if I had one thing of advice, it would just be to trust your instincts, do what you love doing. People, you might get negative feedback, or you might get, I don't know, you just have to block all that stuff out, stay true to yourself, and don't second guess yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, I think all of what CJ and Mike said, plus, I think it's just like anything really. If you're going to be successful, you have to dedicate yourself to it. You have to work very hard, sacrifice quite a bit, and stay true to yourself. I know it's a cliche, but it really is true, especially in the arts. And put yourself out there, do things that make you feel uncomfortable, take opportunities that you want to say, no way I'm doing that, and do it anyway, because, at the very least, it's a learning, opportunity. At the most, you in this career, or in this business especially, you never know what's going to come out of what. So that's the kind of the magic of it, and the painfulness of it too. You can put a lot into something and get nothing, or you can do something that is just an afterthought, and that can be your biggest break. Or so I just say stay open to everything and work hard and be yourself.
Definitely, everything they said is totally right on. Staying true to yourself. Don't listen to the right people, but don't listen to everybody. Don't read the reviews, but obsess over them at the same time. There's lots of contradictions in this business that don't really necessarily make sense until you are living inside of them. But I think most importantly is as songwriters, people that are composing and writing songs, it's like just keep writing songs. Don't definitely be proud of yourself if you wrote a good song and you did it but if 3 years down the road, you're like, I had that good song 3 years ago. No, you should be writing a song. You should be able to put out a record every year. You shouldn't necessarily, and it shouldn't, but keep writing. It's important to stay on top of it. It's like any, it's an art, but it also is it's an exercise. It's your brain. It's your muscles. You know, keep riding. Just gotta keep riding. It's like running. Like if you could run 6 miles 3 years ago, like I could do that right now. I haven't kept up with it, but I've kept up with writing songs, luckily. So keep up with it. Stay writing songs. You're gonna get sore.
Right on. All right, questions from the audience. Right over here. I don't know if we've got, do we have a microphone out there? All right.
I'm Dom Erickson. I'm a copyright attorney and a songwriter. I love what you guys have to say. Thank you so much for speaking. My question is, I know the art's so hard, so how do you make money off of it in terms of getting your songs in music and TV?
So how do you make a living off your music? I think is probably the. Specifically, you're talking about copyright issue, I guess. Yeah, getting your songs in film and television.
Well, I mean, Orenda, you guys have had probably the most success out of anybody that I know. How does it, like, you should just start with that.
Well, it's definitely one of those things where I feel like there's a percentage of luck involved, and I have had a lot of music in film and TV. I think part of that is that the style of music and the sound of my vocals happens to lend itself to a cinematic feel, and so I'm kind of lucky in that aspect that's also what that's my style, and it fits in with film and TV. There's lots of bands that have different sounds that make it harder for them to be placed. Do you agree, CJ? So there's a little bit of luck involved, but I think, and also sometimes you just have music supervisors, in LA or New York that are fans of your band.
Do you have an agent that shops to
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is, and so on the more business side of, is that, of course, like Saddle Creek is my label, and there is a person there that is just devoted to pitching the songs to film and television. So he's been responsible for a lot of my placements. And then also you can, go a different route and actually sign a publishing deal or something of that nature with companies that just specifically do that, and they either take a percentage of what they get for you, or they take a percentage of your actual songwriting, depending on what kind of deal you do. You probably know the difference between the deals, but you can go the route of having people actively pitch your stuff, and you should if you can. I mean, that's definitely a big component of it, but I think a lot of it is also luck, somewhat.
Yeah, Saddle Creek, Jeff Tafoya does a tremendous job, I think, marketing the music.
I hate to give Jeff any credit for anything, but yeah, he's gotten a lot of our music placed in TV shows and commercials and movies, and Orenda and other bands of ours will go to LA and.
there's a Saddle Creek office in LA, right? No?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recent. That's a recent development.
Well, I know, but that's
Well, yeah, that's part of the reason we did it was, having a presence in LA doesn't hurt when it comes to that sort of thing. But Jeff, sets up showcases where Orenda plays for music supervisors, who are the people that actually decide what songs go into TV shows, movies, commercials, things like that. And Jeff, when we have a new release come out, he'll send all of those people the new albums. Sometimes those people will send calls out, we have a scene that needs a song that sounds like this, and then he'll, him having a knowledge of Saddle Creek's catalog can be like, oh, well, this, and this song would fit that well, and he can send that to them, and that's kind of how, on the label side, we've gotten things placed.
Great source of secondary income, perhaps? Primary income? Was there any other questions? Anybody? Out there? Yes, over here.
I've got a question. It's kind of a nice mix of artists and record label and recording. Say you're an artist and you've got your handful of songs, you get ready to head to the studio and know exactly in your head how you want the stuff to sound. How much does that change
So the question is, you have your songs written, or you have them in your mind, and then you go into the label, or you go into the studio, and you work with your band, and it changes? Or with the producer?
I think you learn pretty quick upon recording that it doesn't always necessarily sound like it's going to in like your rehearsal space or your wherever you're practicing. I mean, it can, but you start. I think you hear the holes more when you're listening back to playback, and that's kind of like when you might come up with parts to fill the spaces that you didn't hear before. But it's important to be open to that. I've been in the studio with people that are like, no, man, this is how it's gonna sound live. I'm like, well, it sounds thin and bad. Like, let's put another guitar on it. Because. So I'd be open to things, and if they don't work, you don't have to. That's the beauty. You don't have to use it. You can, this day and age, you certainly don't.
I mean, did you guys
Make a record on a
have you had
4-track.
experiences where it's like somebody walks in with a song, and then it comes out the machine sounding completely different? Probably does more often than not, right?
As far as like from the demo process? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But that's intentional most of the times in the demos. Yeah, it's, like what Matt said is important. Just being open to whatever happens. And, I think the studio is a very experimental place. So it's, fun to take a left turn and do something that you think is totally inappropriate, and it kind of works, and it's kind of cool. And it gives songs sort of a rebirth maybe in your mind as well. Like, it's not necessarily what you'd originally conceived, but it's actually cooler. It's taken this little turn, and now, this is even better. So hopefully that's what happens most all of the time. It's just to be open to that sort of reinterpretations. And my role as an outsider sometimes to the writing process, I get the kind of fresh set of ears on it, and I can offer suggestions. And most of my favorite studio experiences have been when it is that open, collaborative relationship with the artist. Because
I think it's almost always going to sound different than the demo, but one way to make that a positive thing is to know who you're going in with when who you're going into the studio with, who the producer or the engineer is. Either know them so well that you trust them so much that you have kind of like a common ground, a common language, or have a conversation with them before you go in. But I mean, I find it kind of a magical experience for it to end up sounding different than how I intended. But at the same time, I am very careful with who I choose to work with, and very lucky to be able to work with really amazing producers. So it's always a very pleasant surprise.
So you've had a gee whiz moment where it's like, wow, I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yes. Hi.
So my question was for some of the younger singer and songwriters, what are some kind of opportunities or steps that they should be taking at this point to make it a musical career? So I've heard somebody say maybe you met someone and you took you under their wing, or somebody said you found them off the internet, so should they post things online? Should they be performing, getting exposure? Should they be building musical portfolios to apply to liberal arts colleges? Or what are some of the, I know there's a million and one ways to get.
So how to get to the next level, basically, as a songwriter?
I always tell my students, I teach a lot of younger kids, that they have if they have the drive, which is very important. If they have the drive and they have the talent, and they're like 17, I always tell them to not go to college because it's expensive, and to just like get in a van and drive around and play shows, because they'll be like 30 one day and wishing they did that when they were 18. So you should do that if you're seriously, if you're 17 or 18, don't go to college. Like, hit the road, play music. You want to be in a band? Do that. You won't, when you do go to college when you're 19, you don't really know what you want to do anyway. So you can come back to that. So don't be afraid just to go out there and do it. I get told by a lot of people, they're like, you need to be spending like this many hours a day on Twitter and Instagram. And it's so deflating. It just makes me want to run away from art. And I like to naively think that, no, write songs, play gigs, practice, do those things, get better. And when you're young, you have that opportunity. really embrace that. Don't second guess yourself, because you're not young forever, and that's the beauty of being that age, is that you can, it might sound irresponsible, but it might be the most responsible thing you've ever done, is to just go hit it, drive around, and play everywhere. So.
Well, I met everybody I know in college, so therefore that made sense to me. I didn't, I guess I have a business degree, but but I was from a small town, so like there was no like-minded people. I guess, the main thing that I think you said is just having that drive. And when you're young, that is the time that you can devote to, yourself. Maybe it sounds just following your heart in that respect. That is the biggest cliche, but that is also true. If you really believe in something, you can't. All the things that you said, except for maybe the liberal arts college, I'd put that aside. But all the other things that you said, I thought, those you have to do all of that. Like I don't really know. I came into all this before, the internet existed, but nobody used it really. We started doing this in the early 90s, when I was meeting all these folks and stuff, 93, 94, 95. And so Twitter, none of that existed. And neither did Pandora or any streaming. And, music is consumed in such a different way now. I almost find it easier, though, to get into it because, I sent out cassette tapes to clubs across the country to get our band booked, And nobody does. My point is that's now Twitter.
Right, do the modern version of that.
Yeah, do that. I don't know what that is because I'm old. You kind of have to do that.
Yeah,
it's a humbling experience too when you're doing it.
Yeah, I was saying that, when Maria and I first started, we were forcing ourselves onto everybody in Birmingham. We'd literally drive around with a guitar in the trunk just in case we needed to perform for somebody. And it really does kind of happen that way. You just try to take every opportunity you can to, be developing your art and what you want to do in your private time, and then trying to get that out to as many people as possible. And, and then you will develop that way too, because the more that you write, the more that you play out, you're going to learn what's working, what's not working. And I think that's like a city like Omaha is a great place to develop any kind of, artistic base that then you can go out into the country with. But, so I think it's maybe have some goals, realize what you want, like how big do you want to do this thing and how much of your life do you want to put into it, and then just, then just do it.
All right. Kendra, should we want to wrap up? Yes, I guess we do. Well, so I guess that's it. And they'll be hanging around here. If you have questions, you can ask them. But in the meantime, let's give them a big hand, everybody. All right. Thanks a lot.